I'm Elaine Carter, 67 years old, a widow, and the woman who paid for almost every detail of my only daughter's wedding. And yet, on the very day that should have been filled with joy, I found myself standing in the middle of a glittering ballroom, accused and humiliated by the man who had just married her. Derek, my brand new son-in-law, leaned into the microphone with a grin that made my stomach twist. "Since Elaine is feeling so generous," he announced to the crowd, "she'll be handing us the keys to her beach house so we can enjoy a proper honeymoon." His words rolled over the guests like a wave of champagne bubbles, light and sharp, but every syllable felt like glass cutting through my skin. I froze. My fingers tightened around the small clutch in my hands. The beach house he was talking about was not just a vacation spot. It was the last piece of sanctuary my late husband and I had built together. To demand it here, in front of hundreds of strangers, wasn't just rude. It was an ambush. I managed a smile that tasted bitter. "That house isn't part of today's celebration," I said, my voice low but steady. Derek's smile faltered. His eyes hardened. And before I could breathe again, he snapped his fingers at the security guard standing by the doors. "Then she doesn't belong here. Escort her out." Gasps rippled through the room. My daughter, Rachel, stood frozen in her white gown, her face pale, lips pressed tight, as if silence could erase what was happening. My heart squeezed, not just from betrayal, but from the terrible realization that she wouldn't protect me. Not even now. The guard stepped closer. I lifted my chin. "That won't be necessary," I whispered. Then, without another glance at Derek, I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and sent a single message. "Maggie, 20 minutes. I walked toward the exit, heels clicking against the marble floor. I left behind gasps, whispers, and the triumphant glare of a man who thought he had won. He didn't know I had been preparing for this very moment. The night air hit me as soon as I stepped outside the ballroom. My chest burned with shame and fury, but my steps never faltered. I had been shoved aside in front of family, friends, and strangers, treated as if my worth ended the moment I refused to hand over a set of keys. The valet offered to bring my car around, but I waved him off. I needed the walk. I crossed the circular driveway lined with glowing lanterns and called Maggie. Her voice came through steady, sharp, exactly what I needed. "I got your message," she said. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered. "Good. Give me 20 minutes. I'll meet you in the lobby with everything." I slipped the phone back into my purse and kept moving, my heels clicking against the pavement. My pulse slowed. Fury settled into clarity, and clarity into resolve. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and the quiet power of not bending when someone tries to break you. Through the glass doors, I could still see Derek inside, laughing too loudly. His arm draped around Rachel's shoulders as though nothing had happened. My daughter stood stiff beside him, her eyes darting everywhere but mine. The sight of her cut deeper than Derek's cruelty. I wanted to believe she would run after me, whisper that it was all a mistake. But the truth was there in her silence. I walked to a bench under the palms near the entrance, sat down, and smoothed the fabric of my dress. I thought of the night Derek had tried to rifle through my desk drawers when he thought I was asleep. The way Rachel insisted he was just looking for a pen. I thought of the bank statement with a signature that wasn't mine. Each memory stacked like bricks, building a wall of proof I had tried too long to ignore. Tonight, that wall would hold. Headlights swept across the driveway as a sleek black sedan pulled up. Maggie stepped out in her tailored suit, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She spotted me instantly and gave a nod, brisk and professional. "Ready to turn their party upside down?" she asked. I stood, lifted my chin, and slipped my arm through hers. Let's give them a night they won't forget. Together we walked back toward the glowing doors, the muffled laughter of the ballroom waiting for us, unaware of the storm about to roll in. As Maggie and I crossed the marble lobby, my mind couldn't help but drift backward. Tonight's public humiliation was not the first crack. It was simply the loudest. I remembered the afternoon Rachel called to tell me she was changing her last name even before the wedding. She said it with a forced cheer, as if rehearsed, explaining that Derek wanted them to start fresh. My heart sank then, though I smiled through the phone. A fresh start that erased me felt less like a beginning and more like a goodbye. The warning signs had been there all along. Derek had insisted on reviewing the guest list, crossing out names he didn't like. Too many of your friends, he'd told Rachel, pretending it was about budget. I caught Rachel red-eyed in my kitchen afterward, shredding the invitations I'd already mailed. She whispered, "It's easier this way," as though saying it out loud could make it true. Then there was the night I found him in my study. The desk drawers were half open, files scattered. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled thinly and said he was looking for a pen, but his hands reeked of sweat, and the pen he held was capped. A week later, a bank statement arrived with my name scrawled on a loan application I'd never signed. I had stared at the signature for a long time, bile rising in my throat. I didn't confront him then. Instead, I called Maggie, told her what I'd seen, and she urged me to secure everything, duplicate the documents, scan the originals, lock the safe. Quiet strength wins wars, she said. I took her advice, even as Rachel begged me not to cause trouble. Now, standing in the lobby with Maggie beside me, the weight of those memories pressed hard against my ribs. Every red flag, every silenced protest, every moment I allowed Derek to chip away at me and my daughter, it all funneled into this night. The ballroom doors shimmered at the end of the corridor, muffled music spilling out. My pulse thudded as I thought of Derek inside, convinced he had already won. He believed I was gone, discarded, humiliated. Maggie tightened her grip on the leather portfolio and glanced at me. "Are you sure you want to do this in front of everyone?" I met her gaze. He chose to make it public. So will I. With that, we stepped toward the glowing doors, ready to turn celebration into reckoning. The ballroom doors swung open, and the music dipped for just a moment as Maggie and I stepped inside. Heads turned, some of the guests whispered, others stared with open curiosity. Derek's face stiffened the instant he saw me. He tightened his grip on Rachel's waist as though anchoring himself. His smile forced. "Well," he said loudly, "look who couldn't stay away." I didn't answer. Maggie moved forward with the confidence of someone who had done this before. She reached the small stage where Derek had been making his grand announcements earlier. Without asking permission, she placed her leather portfolio on the microphone stand and spoke with clear authority. "My name is Margaret Lane. I am counsel for Elaine Carter. I have a notice to deliver that concerns property rights and financial matters directly related to tonight's events." The crowd shifted uneasily. Laughter gave way to silence. Derek's smirk faltered. Maggie pulled out a sealed envelope, cracked it open, and read aloud. "Effective immediately. Mr. Derek Walsh is barred from occupying or accessing the Carter Beach House located on Ocean Point Drive. Any prior understanding has been revoked. This notice is legally binding and enforceable." Gasps rippled across the room. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered against the floor. Derek's face flushed. "You can't do this in the middle of my wedding," he shouted. "Oh, I can," Maggie replied, her voice steady. "And that isn't all. Mr. Walsh, You are hereby served with documentation showing evidence of attempted fraud, specifically a forged signature on a loan application in Mrs. Carter's name. She held up a copy of the document, the false signature visible under the bright lights. Whispers rose like a tide. Rachel's face drained of color as she stared at the paper. "This is ridiculous," Derek barked, but his voice cracked. I felt the eyes of the room press against me, but instead of shrinking, I straightened. For the first time that evening, my humiliation burned away, replaced by calm certainty. Maggie closed the folder and stepped aside. "Mrs. Carter has further information to share," she announced. I walked to the microphone, the spotlight hot on my shoulders. Derek hissed under his breath, "Sit down, old woman." But I only met his eyes and said softly enough for him to hear, "Your game is over." The room held its breath, waiting for what would come next, and I was ready to give it to them. The microphone felt heavy in my hands, but my voice came out steady. "There is one more matter to address tonight," I said, letting my gaze sweep across the guests. Something I had intended to keep private, but since Derek chose to turn this wedding into a stage, I'll honor that choice. I signaled to Maggie, and she pressed a button on the small remote she carried. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the screen lowered behind the band. A video began to play, my own face appearing larger than life, recorded weeks earlier in my attorney's office. In the recording, I sat upright in a navy blazer, hands folded neatly in my lap. My voice carried with quiet gravity. "This is the updated last will and testament of Elaine Carter. Effective immediately. My daughter, Rachel Carter Walsh, will no longer be a beneficiary of my estate. The Carter Beach House, as well as all financial holdings, will be placed into the Harbor Haven Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting older women from financial exploitation." A murmur surged through the room. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Derek stiffened beside her, his jaw working furiously. "On screen," I continued, my tone firm. "This decision has not been made out of spite but necessity. Love does not excuse betrayal. Family does not excuse manipulation. Boundaries protect dignity, and dignity must remain intact for love to survive." The video ended, leaving silence in its wake. The screen rose, the lights brightened, but the weight of my words lingered like smoke. Rachel stumbled forward, her voice breaking. "Mom, how could you?" My chest ached, but I held her gaze. "Because you wouldn't stop him. Because you let him strip me down in front of the world. I still love you, Rachel, but I cannot leave my life's work in hands that don't protect it." Her tears spilled, and she shook her head. Derek leaned into her ear, hissing something I couldn't hear, but the fury on his face told me enough. I stepped away from the microphone, my decision laid bare for everyone to see. I hadn't just protected the house. I had drawn the line, one that could no longer be erased. The crowd stirred, whispers turning into open judgment, eyes narrowing at Derek and Rachel. The storm I had carried in silence was finally out in the open, and now I would watch to see who could stand in its aftermath. The ballroom dissolved into chaos the second the video ended. Guests who had been clapping moments earlier now whispered, pulling out their phones. Derek grabbed the microphone, shouting, "She's lying! This is all a stunt!" His face burned red, sweat glistening under the lights. Rachel tugged his sleeve, her voice breaking. "Stop! Derek, please! They're all staring." For the first time, her tone carried doubt, as though she no longer believed every word he said. A man in the audience stood, one of Derek's old colleagues. "We all wondered about you," he said coldly. "Now we know." His words rippled through the room like stones across water. Every camera turned on Derek. The humiliation he had meant for me was now his. He shouted threats in my direction, but I didn't answer. Silence was stronger. I walked out, heels striking marble, while the crowd's murmurs rose behind me. By morning, I knew those recordings would be everywhere. He had tried to erase me in public. Instead, he erased himself. By sunrise, the wedding wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a headline. Clips of Derek's rage and Maggie's calm voice spread across every feed. At first, I wanted to hide, but messages kept pouring in. Strangers, mostly older women, confessed they too had been silenced or exploited by family. My shame had become their echo. Within a week, I was seated beneath studio lights on a daytime show. The host asked why I'd revealed so much so publicly. I answered simply, because he chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. Boundaries protect dignity. Silence would have meant surrender. The audience broke into applause. For once, I felt seen. Later that night, I read through letters piled on my kitchen table, widows pressured to sell homes, grandparents cut off from grandchildren, mothers drained of savings. Their pain was heavier than mine, but it gave me clarity. Maggie looked across the table at me. "You can't answer all of them," she said, "but you can build something that does." I nodded, staring at the letters. Derek had tried to make me small. Instead, he had handed me a reason to stand taller. The letters kept arriving until they filled boxes in my hallway. Each envelope carried the weight of another woman's silence, finally breaking. Stories of bank accounts drained, of children who turned cold, of spouses who treated them like burdens. Every letter reminded me that my humiliation had echoed in homes far beyond my own. One evening, Maggie spread the letters across my dining table, her eyes scanning the pages. "This isn't just sympathy," she said. "It's a call for help. You can't answer all of them one by one, but maybe we can build something bigger." The thought lingered long after she left. I walked down to the beach house, the same house Derek had demanded like it was his birthright. I unlocked the door and stepped into rooms still scented faintly of cedar and sea salt. My husband and I had built it as a retreat, a place where our family could breathe freely. But somewhere along the way, it had become a trophy in someone else's eyes. I stood in the center of the living room and whispered to the walls, "You're not theirs. You're not even mine alone anymore." The next week, Maggie and I filed paperwork to create the Harbor Haven Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide older women facing exploitation with temporary shelter, legal guidance, and counseling. My beach house became the first sanctuary. The transformation was quiet but powerful. Fresh coats of paint covered the faded walls. Volunteers filled the cupboards with the food and stocked the library with donated books. A retired nurse offered to stay on weekends, and a local counselor agreed to host group sessions by the fireplace. The first time I welcomed two women through the front door, both widows, both carrying stories too familiar, I felt a surge of something I hadn't expected: peace. The villa was no longer just a memory of what I had lost. It was proof of what I could still build. Neighbors who once gossiped about the wedding fiasco now brought casseroles, donated linens, or offered to garden. Slowly, the house became a hub of quiet strength, a place where women who thought they had no voice could learn to speak again. Standing on the porch one evening, watching the waves roll in, I realized Derek's cruelty had unintentionally handed me a purpose. He had tried to strip me of dignity, but instead, he had given me a mission. And just when I thought I had closed the door on family entirely, a knock at the villa would test me in ways I hadn't prepared for. The knock at the villa door came just after sunset. I opened it to find Rachel standing there, her wedding dress long gone, replaced by jeans and a cardigan that looked borrowed and wrinkled. Beside her clutched a small hand, Lily, my 9-year-old granddaughter, eyes wide and uncertain. "Mom," Rachel whispered, her voice raw. "I left him. I should have left sooner. I should have listened." Tears streaked her cheeks, and for a moment she looked like the little girl I used to comfort after nightmares. I wanted to reach out, to fold her into my arms, but something inside me held still. "You stood by him when he tried to take everything," I said softly. "You let him humiliate me." Her knees bent as if the weight of those words pressed her down. I was scared. He controlled everything, but I see it now. "I need your help. Lily needs your help." Lily looked up at me with eyes so much like her grandfather's that my breath caught. She whispered, "Grandma, can I stay here sometimes? It feels safe." I crouched down and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart, you'll always have a place here." But when I stood, I turned to Rachel. "For you, things will be different. I'll create a trust for Lily, money for school, for her future. But you will not have access. If you want to rebuild with me, it has to be through honesty, not dependency." Rachel nodded through her tears, a fragile acceptance. I let them inside, the warmth of the villa wrapping around us. For Lily, the door was open. For Rachel, the path back would be long, but at least it began here. The villa grew quiet again after Rachel and Lily left that first night. I sat on the porch, watching the tide creep in, listening to the waves strike the rocks like a steady heartbeat. For years I'd thought of this house as fragile, something I had to guard against being taken. Now I realized it wasn't fragile at all. It was enduring, just like me. In the weeks that followed, Harbor Haven Foundation took shape. Women arrived with suitcases and trembling hands, carrying stories that mirrored my own. We drank tea by the fire, shared meals around the long table, and little by little, I watched them reclaim their strength. The villa became what it was always meant to be, a safe harbor. Rachel visited sometimes, careful and hesitant, her eyes searching mine for forgiveness. I wasn't ready to hand out freely. I didn't shut the door on her, but I didn't fling it wide open either. Love with boundaries. That was the only way forward. Lily, though, bounded through the rooms with laughter that seemed to mend cracks I thought would never heal. For her, I could believe in the possibility of something new. One afternoon, Maggie handed me a letter. "From one of the women who stayed here," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside, the woman wrote that she had arrived broken, but left with hope. "You taught me dignity isn't lost when someone tries to steal it," she wrote. "It's found when we refuse to let them." I folded the letter and felt tears sting my eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition. My story had begun with humiliation, but it no longer ended there. As the sun dipped low over the ocean, I thought of my late husband, of the promises we made on this porch long ago. I whispered into the salt air, "It's safe now. I've kept it safe." The villa stood strong behind me, alive with the voices, laughter, and the quiet courage of women who refused to disappear. And I understood at last, the greatest inheritance we leave is not money or property, but the example that dignity is worth defending. Always,